The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host and or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and or Paranormal Buzz Radio and or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is prohibited. Paranormal Buzz Radio will not be held responsible for you holding your knees, crying, and rocking in a corner in a puddle of your own urine, or being beheaded by a group of children in a cornfield. In fact, if you come across a group of children in a cornfield, we promise to make fun of you as you run away screaming in terror. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Demon Folklorist. Yep, that's me, I'm the Demon Folklorist, and today we are going to talk about Baba Yaga. Now, I grew up with Baba Yaga. The first time I'd ever heard of her was through an adaptation of Vasilisa and the Magic Doll, which is a Cinderella tale from Russia. Now, Vasilisa was a beautiful young woman who lost her mother, but her mom gave her a doll and told her to give the doll a little bit to eat or drink and talk to it whenever she was sad. The doll's eyes would shine and it would give her advice. Her dad got remarried to a horrible woman with stepdaughters who treated Vasilisa as a slave, and then eventually set up a situation where she had to go ask the fearsome Baba Yaga, the witch in the forest, for light. And they probably assumed that she would die in this pursuit. Now, the light that they're talking about shone mysteriously from skulls that were placed around her property in the house with the chicken legs propped up high in the air. She ended up being Baba Yaga's slave for a little while, and then she mentioned her mother's blessings at one point randomly, and Baba Yaga was like, "Get out, no blessings here," and banished her from the house. She grabbed a skull of light so that her stepmother wouldn't be angry, and then when she got back to the house, she found that her stepmother and stepsisters had left the cabin, and her father came back, and it was just the two of them. And hopefully, if he remarried, it was to a much better woman. And if you can hear that, that is the sound of my bad little boy running his claws up and down the chair and then climbing on the back of it. Salem is my recording buddy, but not always the best one. I really think that Baba Yaga is who she appears to you as. In her tales, she might eat you, or she might apprentice you. Maybe it's a case-by-case basis. Some see her as this earth goddess, and other people see a horrible witch who's actually dead and eats the living. No matter what you think about her, she's an interesting and enduring character. Something to be feared, especially if you cross her. In the John Wick movies, I think it's the second one, it's with the Russian dude, he talks about John Wick, and he's like, he calls him Baba Yaga, the boogeyman. But John, like her, is only the boogeyman when he has been crossed. She enters our dreams, or perhaps just our nightmares. What's really interesting about her, and I didn't know this, when I looked into the folklore of Baba Yaga, is that she is not actually just one woman. She is many women. She is a Baba Yaga, not the Baba Yaga. Her functions seemingly shift with the story because it seemed to be a way to sort of refer to like spinster-like older ladies who perhaps don't have children. If you asked any Russian person, because she hails from Russia, if she is a witch, they will inevitably say yes. So that's also very interesting. But she first appeared in folk tales from Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus since the 18th century. Her evolution is most likely from a pagan goddess, though on the other end of the spectrum, she is a carnivorous witch. She is this amalgamation of many different deities and magic types. She worships neither God nor the devil. It even occurs to me that she's maybe like a Mother Earth in a way, but more of the Mother Earth of the forest. Animals owe their allegiance to her, and supposedly she's a lot more hungry for Russian flesh and blood than any other type, which is weird considering she herself is Russian. So maybe she protects the land from bad Russians, or simply maybe people who have bad intentions. But that is very odd that that's specifically what she hungers for. And then, of course, there's the idea that she eats children. But oddly, in these tales where she does actually kidnap a child, she doesn't actually eat it in some of them. She just, like, the kid is fine. It's normally to teach somebody much older, connected to the child, some kind of lesson. Motifs, of course, tend to repeat in her stories because of the way that oral storytelling works and then cultural diffusion happens. So a common one is the way that her role is the deciding factor of the story. It will be determined by her and her actions. She is the judge of somebody's character, if they are true and ready to move forward in their story, or if they will waffle and fail. Judgment, after all, like karma, is kind of ambiguous and fairly neutral. We might read it as being against us or evil, but true judgment or karma is neither for or against. It just is. You basically get what you deserve. She is definitely a witch, though, once again. Baba actually just means older peasant woman, though it's sort of like it's an insult now. Like a lot of once neutral language for women becomes in patriarchal systems, like wench, for instance, used to be a completely neutral term for women, and now it's definitely an insult. Yaga, people don't actually know what it means, but it's not a name in Russian. It's a description. It just basically means scary old woman. And there are other Baba Yagas that can be sisters or cousins. So once again, she isn't the Baba Yaga, she's a Baba Yaga. She is, though, considered to be very ugly. They actually take time out of these stories to fully describe in detail just how hideous she is, with her sharp iron teeth, a long nose, and pendulous breasts. And she's somehow conceived daughters without the help of a man, which isn't really that crazy if you think about how during this time period, the role of the man when it came to childbirth wasn't truly understood. So I'm sure that they were just like, yeah, Baba Yaga has those abilities to just make a baby. Of course she does. You never know. That's at least what's posited. It could simply be that Baba Yaga exists in some type of like liminal magical realm where she reproduces differently. We don't know. I always like to look at the logical side of folklore and then the fantastical, because it somehow embodies both, and I think that's awesome. That's one of the many, many reasons why I love folklore. A notable way to really identify her is by that house that I mentioned before. It's usually a cabin sitting on top of chicken legs, which also we need to address that it might be a descriptor of the way the house looks. In the book I was using, I'll talk about that a little bit later, for this episode, to get more information on Baba Yaga and her role in folklore, there was a student who had come forward being like, yeah, actually, I just went to Sweden and I saw these houses that looked from certain angles like they were standing on chicken legs. So maybe it's not that Baba Yaga has a house that is actually on these like gigantic chicken legs. It's just how it was built and that's how it looks. Again, fantastical side by side with the logic. But what these stories often have is the chicken legs turning the house around to watch her land from all sides. If you need to get in, like to talk to her or to get something from her, you can stop the house from turning with some kind of magical rhyme. Her house also could be situated anywhere. It is usually in the forest, but she's also been found in an empty field along the seashore. Her house is always on the border of another world. Permanently liminal, but also meant to signify that she exists far from the hero or heroine's homeland. It's also usually surrounded by a fence of like bones or skulls filled with light, whatever really is probably fulfilling the function of the story. Is she menacing, or does she just want to keep people out? Which, fair. Who wouldn't want to keep people out? People suck. Her house is also implied to be very rich with food, which reminds me very heavily of the witch in Gretel and Hansel. She was a cannibal witch who created these feasts from dismembered parts of children that she transmogrified into food. Maybe she is a Baba Yaga. She doesn't follow convention or feel very much love for children like older women are supposed to according to society, but the movie is like, follow your own path. And by follow your own path, it means do whatever you want, selfishly, even if it means killing kids or eating your young brother into the forest by himself. I have mixed feelings about the movie. Because I do think that I got the message, but I also thought the message wasn't fully, like, translated very well, but it is a movie I always come back to time and time again because of that rejection of these famously patriarchal roles of the woman as mother, and how young girls often become stand-in mothers when a child's mother decides they don't want to be one, or when they go crazy, like that's what happens to their mother in the movie. Baba Yaga is also mentioned with her stove somewhere in the stories about her. Joanna Hubbs posits that the stove is actually a place to keep dead souls, or it's a conduit from death to rebirth. If Baba Yaga is the crone in the triple goddess, then the Rusalki, or these mermaid-like creatures who are actually quite dangerous, are more of the maiden. And it does make me go, okay, who is the mother then? But, of course, that's not the subject of this episode. Baba Yaga is the cold, damp earth during winter and spring, a time of death and rebirth, but still very cold, very unfriendly. And perhaps she does eat the bodies of the dead like a colder Mother Earth, or maybe she's just the devil's grandmother. Who knows? I don't think we can classify her as the devil's grandmother. That's just one of the terms that I've heard. I think she's probably a lot more fair than that and not evil enough. Because to confer with Baba Yaga in her stories is to be continually tested. Those who work with her today as a deity know this to be true. She wants to push you. She wants to get to the heart of you. And she might eat you. You don't know. But she also may teach you what you need to know or help you in some way. Vladimir Prop, who is a Russian folklorist who had classified all these different fairy tales, he considered her to be a tester of character and a donor. Sometimes she helps the hero or the heroine evade the villain, or she might be the pursuer, but then help them get home inadvertently. When telling these stories, it was very clear that she wasn't meant to be the same character every single time. And like I said, maybe it's a case-by-case basis, or she is just different characters in different stories because she's a Baba Yaga. She may eat you if you fail. There's always that undercurrent of her eating you or eating the children, but like I said before, the children are never really in any true danger when they're stolen. So maybe it's just a lesson. Also, she could simply be a warning for children. Like, don't go here at night, or don't do this, or don't do that, or Baba Yaga from the forest is going to get you. You know, a lot of supernatural tales tend to function that way, to try and get children to behave. She also tests peasant virtues, things that every peasant woman should know how to do in the home. And perhaps this was simply to teach young people their traditional roles in villages and society, because most of these stories end with marriage, which, if you think about it, is a fundamental part of peasant society. And she is the test to get to the other side of adulthood. Also, Baba Yaga, as a child eater, might have been to address the fears surrounding infant and child mortality in story form, or, again, just a way to get children to behave with a supernatural story. Sometimes she dies in the story, usually in association with the fire, but if she's like burned once, it usually means she'll come back again in story form. For whatever reason, probably to truly kill her, it's got to be at least 3 times, because 3 is the magic number in fairy tales. But it almost is an association with fire. So she is not all-powerful, but she is an ambiguous presence in Russian liminal worlds. Like a mushroom that you find in the forest, she might be poisonous, or she might be nourishing. She is ancient wisdom, but she is also fearsome. She's not to be fucked with. And I love that. She also sort of reminds me of the Greek goddess Hestia in the way that she represents the home and peasant tasks and the hearth, which in this case, Baba Yaga's hearth is her stove. When worshipping her or working with her as a goddess or a spirit guide, people notice that she's not evil, but quite human in her darkness. She represents the dormant, forgotten places of the world, and the knowledge of this strange world that if you can face it will be very rewarding. Perhaps she's simply a misunderstood character, or maybe she's just not friendly the way women are kind of taught to be. We must need her as a society, as an archetype, because she persists. She represents balance and esoteric knowledge, and also a testing of your own character. Can you make it to the end of the story? Can you do what needs to be done? In movies about her, she's this horrible character who eats children, and it doesn't really acknowledge any other parts of her, just this sensationalized villainy. She is not a woman. She's only evil, personified in a female form, and this made me think of all sorts of things. Is she truly ugly and evil, or is she us? Is she what we fear we will become when time runs us ragged and gnarls us, makes us retreat far from other people? Or are we encroaching on her and disturbing her peace? Is that why she gets so angry? In societies obsessed with the first bloom of beauty and youth, like ours unfortunately is, the aging woman is considered disgusting. 30 is now considered to be the point when you start to become an old hag. And I don't know about you, I just turned 30 this year, and I don't think I've ever been more beautiful or more happy or more confident in myself and my abilities. So very seriously, don't let anybody tell you that 30 marks the end and that your value as a woman somehow decreases after, 27 or 28, because it doesn't. And honestly, you should live for yourself and not be buying into the whole patriarchal shit of, oh, you need to be attractive to men. And it's like, why? I do love that nowadays that's kind of where women are at. We're just like, why though? Why don't we be attractive for ourselves? Why don't we wear what we want to wear and look how we want to look and just be happy? So a movie I watched recently is called Matriarch, and it addressed this idea that we're afraid to age, to die, to wither away and become nothing. And then it made me think of another movie called The Manor that also talks about this, which of course made me think of another movie called Mercy from 2014, talking about these ideas where they turn to things that are far older and stronger than them to stay alive for longer, but without the fearsome parts of aging. And then Mercy, in her movie, she ends up fighting a supernatural possession because an entity called Hastur has come to take what she traded for. Relic also comes to mind about the transformation of aging, which for the people that are left behind after an aging parent dies, it can be very, very hard to watch that process, to watch people forget themselves and turn into something you don't recognize. In the book that I was using, which is called Baba Yaga, the Wild Witch of the East in Russian Fairy Tales, if you're interested in learning more about her, it's a great book, check it out. They say the aging female body as the grotesque aftermath of female fertility. And that, of course, set my imagination on fire and made me start thinking of all these horror movies that are all about the horrors of aging. And we're going to talk about them a little bit because why not? So, Mercy is about a formerly strong woman who is complicated, but she loved her family, and she wanted nothing more than for all of them to be together. She sacrificed all the good inside her to have this family via witchcraft, and she's reduced, unfortunately, to a slobbering, unintelligible, shouting mess by Hastur. As he possesses her, they find out that this is not just normal aging or dementia, which is unfortunate that it is as widespread as it is. But this is not part of aging, that this is actually because of this evil entity that she traded things for. So she's now a shadow of the very strong person she once was. And I find the lore of this movie very interesting. So it talks about the Weeping Book. Legend tells us that necromancers created this book as an effective way to hide what you were doing. You just had to cry on the book to get the necromantic recipe of what she wanted. It said that God wouldn't give Mercy what she wanted, so she turned to someone, or rather something that could, who looks back from the hills, the old and mean one, Hastur. People do more evil in the name of love than anything else. Multiple miscarriages broke her heart. All she truly wanted were children, so she sold her soul and her husband, actually, to Hastur through this weeping book to have 3 babies. And the price of those 3 babies was first her husband, which she raised these children without. And then over time, like when hard times came, her crops were the only one that didn't die. And then she also found gold on her land. And the priest who talks to the grandson later is like she was trading away parts of herself, the good parts, for what she wanted. Which of course made me think of the trade master in the book Messenger, which is part of Lois Lowry's Giver Quartet. So it's like the continuation of the Giver story. It's the 3rd book, and the trade master comes and he can give you anything you want. If you want to be suddenly handsome and young, he can give that to you, but there is a price. You have to give away something in return. And what would you do for the thing that you wanted the most? Dark magic, I think, takes and breaks the person who enacts it. And then there was some other very interesting lore in the movie, like talking about Haints and the hill folk legend of the death wolf who roams the boundaries of the spirit world and this world, hunting for lost souls. And if she catches you, she'll eat you and shit you out in hell. Awesome. So yeah, like it's a pretty good movie. The performances were really good in this movie. It's based on a Stephen King story, and I'm like, I am not surprised at all because I love Stephen King. So yeah. Then Relic, really all I want to say about that movie is it was a really good movie. I wasn't really sure where they were going with it at first. Like, is this a metaphor or is this actually supernatural? And it seemingly is kind of both. And I think when a movie's really effective, especially horror movies, it can use both easily and really address both things. But really the message of the story is it's about watching your loved one age. It's like watching something else possessing them and changing them into something they're not, which is, again, something that was talked about sort of in Mercy. And then the Manor, another strong, vibrant woman who is losing her memory to aging, finds herself in the middle of being sacrificed to a supernatural entity. The other people in this manor house have decided, oh, like, we're going to sacrifice her to this. It seemingly is kind of like a dryad. It seems to live in the tree and come out and, like, eat people. I don't think dryads do that, but hey, you never know. This entity is also never named, which I think is interesting because do we really need to give it a name? It's older than we can imagine. So that's probably not the point. But some of the older folks that she's made friends with, they may have aged on the outside, but on the inside they're perfectly young. And they don't regress deeper into their aging process. All because they're sacrificing, and she decided to get in on it and sacrifice one of the dudes. So now she and these other women have made this like little woman stronghold in this manor house, and her kids are in on it because they want her to live forever too, and they can as well. And then Matriarch is the one that I most recently watched. There is a community of people like this. This woman goes back to her hometown and she realizes that nobody's aged, like, at all. Like, her mom should be old and frail and kind of gnarled from age, and she looks exactly the way she did the last time she was there. And she finds out that this community was feeding this entity that they discovered, the Queen of Rot and Rebirth. But in so doing, after finding her, they end up holding her prisoner. And then Laura, who's the main character, is actually the Queen of Rot's daughter. So Celia is Laura's mother, and Laura's father sacrificed himself to let Celia have a child. This gave Celia some of the Queen of Rot's power. it was her seed that grew in Celia, and then they trapped her, this goddess of the forest, in the garden shed. And really, Celia stole the power that she was giving and then used it to her advantage. All it really takes is one messed up person to play God in a village, and then their desire for power being mistaken as worship, and then people end up worshiping them. The real horror, though, again, is this idea of getting old and dying, marked by the black rot bleeding from them. What would you give to live again if youth was like a fount, even if what you were drinking was poison? That's kind of what I got from Matriarch. I think Baba Yaga really embodies all of these different things, and that's why she keeps coming up in our culture every now and then, and she's so easily recognizable. I recognize her by her house. That's me personally, right? But how do you recognize her? How do you see Baba Yaga? Yeah, like, she's just such an interesting character and I never really looked deeper into her and the way that she functions in the folktale. And it made me think about all sorts of things. Is she just a woman who eats children? Is she a misunderstood woman? Tell me what you think. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Next month, we are going to be talking about witch folklore. I'm very excited about that episode. It's going to be a much longer one. It is also going to be the start of season 3 for Demon Folklorist. Yay! So thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for listening, and I hope y'all have a good day, and that you don't meet Baba Yaga in the forest, or if you do, that she helps you. Okay? See you later.